Hey, what a bunch of wusses. They all ran away.
Yeah, let's just keep going forward then, I guess.
This is gonna be an easy dungeon if everything just runs away.
Wait, I think I hear them behind us. They must be following us.
Whatever, let's just keep going forward.
I'm not afraid of them. Arr!
Leaving enemies behind us. Are you sure that's wise? Welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Luke Hart, and I've been a Dungeon Master since high school. On this channel, I give practical Dungeon Master advice that you can implement at your table. And today, I have a very special treat for you because I'm going to tell you about the first total party kill, or TPK, that I had in one of my games. And to be clear, that's the first total party kill ever in any of my games. And of course, as we go along with the storytelling, I'll be throwing down some Dungeon Master tips and advice and all of that good stuff because that's kind of what we do around here. While the party is in Waterdeep, one of the PCs, Lair, receives a letter from his mother saying that she needs to meet with him urgently in a town to the north, hinting at something foul going on. Now, Lair hasn't seen his mother in decades, so he's hopeful that their relationship might be restored. So, the Hand of Light adventuring group travels to that town to the north. And they get there, and they find that the entire town has been decimated, absolutely ravaged, and there are soldiers from Neverwinter to the north. They are maintaining the peace and trying to help them rebuild the town. The heroes find out that an undead army, massive amounts of zombies, skeletons, and other horrible creations had attacked the town, destroying much of it, killing the armed combatants, and then carrying off as hostage the women and children and old infirm people. And Lair's mother was one of them.
What? They got Lair's mother? That's bullcrap.
Yeah, we're gonna track her down and get her back. Don't you doubt. Alright, some DM tips that we can pull from this little segment here. Number one is to make things personal for your players. You see, having the villain kidnap Lair's mother made that very personal for the player. It gave him a stake in the adventure, a reason to do it beyond just the normal, well, the DM prepared it, so I guess we gotta do it. Dig into your players' backstories and see what juicy bits you can extract to use against them, or I should say, to use in your adventures to make things more interesting and personal for them. I can tell you from experience that players love it when you use things from their backstories. My only suggestion is to use them in a good way, because I can imagine that there's probably some Wangrod Dungeon Master out there who'll use things from the backstories to totally screw his players over. Not that I've ever done that. Now, while they're tracking Lair's mother down and all of the undead and all the hostages that were taken from that village, they get a lead on a tower to the east. However, they also hear that there are lots of undead in the Mere of Dead Men, which is to the south of that town. And so they decide to go into the Mere of Dead Men. Now, it was of course I who planted that lead to that tower, but they rather disregarded that and decided, no, we're better off going into the swamp and trying to see if we can find the undead problem there. And so the players spend several game sessions wandering about the swamp, fighting random undead and other evil spawn that I can think of, and encountering an entire UNT temple that they clear out, that I whipped up on the fly.
Into the swamp it is!
We'll track those undead down, even if it takes us months.
I'm not sure Lair's mother has that long, but nobody ever seems to listen to me, so whatever. Alright, so their objective, their actual mission was in that tower, and they decided to go elsewhere. I could have easily taken that tower to the east, put it somewhere in the swamp, and had them come across it. That is a very common Dungeon Master tactic to do. There's a saying, all roads lead to Rome. The same can easily be true in Dungeons & Dragons, especially when your players go the wrong way. And doing that is a completely valid and legitimate way to go about things. However, I decided not to do that. You see, sometimes it's fun to play through the wrong decision, and it gives the players a feeling that your game world is this open world where their decisions matter. If they decide to go the wrong way, it's the wrong way. They feel as though there is a legitimate right answer, and they just happen to get the wrong one. And if I had just moved the adventure to the swamp, then I am in a way devaluing my player's decision, even though they technically wouldn't have known the difference. But I would have. And I don't always do it that way. I don't always remain adamant in not moving things around. Sometimes they might run into that thing over here when I had originally planned on it being over here. And I don't think there's a right answer, a right true way to do this. Sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other, and both are valid ways to go about it. And finally, after wandering the swamp for several game sessions and clearing out untold amounts of undead and other nasties, my players rightfully decide they should have gone to the tower to begin with. So they go to the tower and they find clues pointing them to some crypts that are nearby. As they're exploring the crypts, they run into this massive chamber where undead zombies begin rising up out of tombs, and from behind water fountains, 4 undead beholders kind of exit out and start pummeling them with their eye beams. Taking a beating, my players decide that they had better do something to get by the undead beholders rather than try to face them head on. And so they pull out an ever-smoking bottle, create a massive cloud, totally obscured, so the beholders can't see through it to pinpoint them and target them with their eye rays. And then the heroes sneak through the chamber, leaving the undead behind them.
See? I told you we should have gone to the tower. Yeah, that was a bad call.
Now, before I forget to say something, this adventure that I titled My Dear Missing Mother is probably going to be the next adventure that I publish over on Drive3RPG, so depending on when you see this video, it may or may not be available yet, but go ahead and check that link out in the description. It'll take you to my publishing page over on Drive3RPG. But anyway, what can we glean from this? Their little trick with that ever-smoking bottle had turned what was going to be a pretty hard encounter into a trivial one, where they just sneaked by those undead and left them behind. Now, sometimes, as a dungeon master, when this happens, I get this feeling that my players are kind of getting away with something, that I shouldn't let them get away with that. But doing things like that, slipping by the enemies, tricking them and outsmarting them, makes your players feel clever and like evil geniuses. So sometimes you need to resist the urge to do something like have the beholders go running after them and zapping them with their eye rays, which I could easily have done. Now, I'm not saying all the time, because sometimes it makes sense for the monsters to pursue after them and not to just let them get away. But in this case, I had decided, role-playing these undead beholders, that they had been tasked with guarding that chamber. And so they were not going to leave that chamber to go chase somebody down. Again, I think this is another one of those situations where there is no right answer. There's no correct way to necessarily do it. You as a dungeon master need to decide in your game when's the right time to just kind of let them get away with it and feel clever and awesome about it, and when it's time to, no, you know what, those orcs are not just going to let you wander the hallways because whatever, you happen to trick them out. They're actually going to go after you. Up to you as a dungeon master to decide. Just remember that sometimes it's good to let them get away with it.
Now, before we continue with our story, a word from our sponsors. Are you looking for an online RPG map-making tool? If so, I highly recommend you check out Dungeon Fog. It's so easy to use that even I figured it out. There's both a free version and a paid version with lots of extra features. There's a link down in the description to Dungeon Fog, and you can get 10% off a yearly sub using the Barbarian promo code, the DM Lair.
Hey, this is bullcrap. How does he get his own promo code?
I'm special. And now, back to your regularly scheduled program.
So the groups are traveling down the tunnels in this dungeon, in these crypts, and they come upon some undead creatures covered with chains and some little drummer boys that are controlling them. A fight breaks out, and the paladin uses Turn Undead to cause the undead to run away. Now, the drummer boys aren't undead, but they correctly ascertain that if they stay behind, they'll probably be slaughtered, and so they flee as well along with the undead. As the party continues traveling through the dungeon, the Turn Undead wears off, and the drummer boys regroup their undead minions and begin to follow after the PCs. And I describe to my players this haunting music coming from behind them that seems to be following them. And this is the same music that they originally encountered when they fought the drummer boys. The heroes stop several times to listen to the music, and correctly ascertain that the undead party is still following after them. In fact, at one point I described the music being farther away from them, and as they listen to some doors, I describe it getting closer and closer and closer. So they are 100% positive that these undead are following after them, and eventually, presumably, will catch up. And my players decide to continue pressing onward, leaving this danger behind them. Now here's the thing. I know that just down that corridor is a really nasty encounter with a fallen angel and some other really horrible monsters. And if the PCs continue onward and get sandwiched in between the fallen angel and these drummer boys, it is not going to be good. And I went to great lengths to let my players know that those undead were still following behind them. I gave them 3 distinct opportunities to deal with the threat, and they decided not to. And I think my point here is that when you as a dungeon master know that your players are heading into a crap storm, consider letting them know about it. Maybe not directly, maybe not overtly, but giving them hints and clues so that they should be able to pick up on the fact that, you know what, that dragon we've been hearing about, that's not a wee little one that we can deal with. That's a big, massive, bad one, and we should probably not go there. And the reason I suggest considering this option is that it shifts the situation from a very bad, overt DM screw job to a situation where the DM was actually kind of hinting at the fact that they couldn't handle that threat at that point in their adventuring careers, but the players decided to go do it anyway. They made a bad decision instead of the DM just screwing them over. As a dungeon master, you control the information that your players have. If it doesn't come out of your mouth, then they have no idea that something is a thing. So it's up to you to make sure that they understand the world around them. As much as is reasonable, of course, because sometimes nobody knows what's down in that dungeon. And pressing onward, the players run into that fallen angel and his minions. And very, very quickly in the battle, it becomes obvious that that fallen angel is a beast. And then, in round 2 or 3, those drummer boys and other undead catch up and join the battle, taking the characters in the rear. Fallen angel in the front, and the undead drummer boys in the back. Things go south very, very quickly for the players, and character after character after character goes down. Finally, one character remains, and he is desperately seeking a way to get out of the crypts, to evade this angel and all of its minions. However, he does not find it, and he perishes along with the rest of his adventuring party. Alright, so what's the lesson here?
You're a big jerk, Luke!
Well, maybe. I think that's for you to decide. But sometimes, just sometimes, the players need to suffer the consequences of their actions. They all knew they were being followed. They knew that eventually they would run into another encounter. I was being overly generous in describing 3 times that they were being followed. And they chose to ignore that information and press on. And that was their choice, not mine. Now, could I have backed off a little bit on this massive encounter and allowed them to survive? Or perhaps allowed that one character who's trying to escape? Of course. But that would have cheapened their decisions in the game. In a very real way, it would have been me stealing their agency. Now, for the record, I don't always do it that way. Sometimes I do back off. I am a firm believer in cultivating the game experience for your players. You don't always play by the rules, by the book, by raw. Sometimes you just gotta, enjoy the experience and make sure your players are enjoying the experience. That is why being a dungeon master is a fine art. It is not just a matter of following cold, hard rules out of a book. You as a dungeon master are creating a game experience for your players, not just following the rules. Although that said, I follow the rules probably 95% of the time in my games. How's that for some contradictory advice for you? Figure that one out. This guy's advice sucks. I'm leaving. Anyway, this particular moment was one of those times when I was like, nope. I am not backing off. I am playing this battle straight. These enemies want to murder the characters, and I'm going to roleplay them to the best of my ability and have them do just that. And I decimated them. Boom! No contest. It was nasty and short. Now I bet you're wondering, were my players upset with me? No, they weren't. Not one bit. If anything, they were upset with themselves. At least a couple of them mentioned that while they knew these undead were following them, they were planning on stopping and dealing with them. But for whatever reason, they just didn't do it. They just kept pressing onward. I remember one of my players in particular was a little bit depressed or down about the TPK. And some of the others were disappointed about losing their characters. But you know what? That disappointment quickly turned into excitement over the next week as they all started talking about the new awesome characters that they were going to create. Because the game didn't stop, the campaign didn't stop. They were just going to make new characters and jump back in and we'd keep on going. Death is a part of the game. It is a natural course of events. Embrace it. And if you want to find out what happened in one of my groups, when one of my players taunted me, saying that I didn't have the rocks to kill them all, you might be interested in looking at that video right there. And until next time,
TPK FTW!
Wait, what does that mean?
Total party kill for the win, you moron!